After they helped Grandfather Lafitte get fresh water for his horses, JP and Adele led them out into the pasture. Then the children hurried back to the barn and perched themselves on some bales of hay while Grandfather oiled his favorite saddle. Perched means sat on top of something, especially something from which it could be easy to fall. "Now, are you going to tell us about what happened next?" asked Adele as she climbed up even higher on the hay bales. "I sure am," Grandfather responded. "If you remember, the British had a three-part plan. Well, attacking Washington, D.C. was the next part of that plan. The British believed that capturing the capital city would make the United States think hard about surrendering. They put their plan into action in the summer of 1814. They sent an army of about 4,000 men to the capital. Remember, the entire U.S. Army was only about that big. The British Army was ready to fight. Washington, D.C. was still a new town at that time. The streets were not paved and lots of building was taking place. But the U.S. Congress met there to make laws. The Supreme Court met there. And of course, the President and his wife lived there. The U.S. Congress includes two houses that make up the government of the United States: the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Supreme Court is the highest court. Its job is to understand and interpret the laws of this country. Now, we know from records that August 1814 was especially hot. The people of Washington, D.C. were struggling to cope with the heat when they heard that the British had landed an army near their city. At that time, there were about 8,000 people living in the new capital. "What did the president do?" asked JP as he chewed on a piece of hay. The president knew that he had to be with his soldiers as they faced the British army. He told Mrs. Madison to stay in the president's house. He asked some soldiers to stay with her and keep her safe. Then he rode off to be with his army. "Where did he go?" asked Adele. There was a battle fought in Maryland, just a few miles from the city. The British beat the U.S. Army pretty quickly, and then marched on to Washington, D.C. Many of the people in the city left when they heard that their army had been defeated and that the British were coming. The dirt roads were jammed with people trying to escape, as well as with carts piled high with their possessions. "I think I would have been scared," said Adele. "Yes, Adele, war can be scary," reassured Grandfather Lafitte. "We are proud of these soldiers who fought to protect our country back then, just as we are proud of those in the military today who work hard to keep us safe." "What happened to Mrs. Madison?" JP asked, now with a barn cat sprawled across his lap. "Excellent question," replied Grandfather Lafitte. "Mrs. Madison had waited to see what would happen. When she realized that the British were on their way, she got ready to leave. She wanted to try to save some of her things, but she did not know what to bring with her. The president's house contained so many beautiful and valuable items, but she knew she could not take everything. In the end, Dolly Madison saved important papers and letters that she knew her husband would want. At the last minute, a painting of George Washington was also saved. With the British Army so close, they did not have time to carefully remove the canvas from the frame. Canvas is a special type of cloth artists use to paint on. Instead, the painting and the frame were taken off the wall. Dolly Madison and others in the president's house made it out of the house just in the nick of time, and George Washington was saved. "What happened when the British soldiers got there?" asked JP as he petted his new friend, the barn cat. "The British broke down the doors and rushed inside. It seems Mrs. Madison had set the table for Mr. Madison and his men. Some of the British soldiers later described finding a large table in the dining room set for 40 guests. They described the crystal glasses, shimmering silverware, and delicate china. In the kitchen, meat had been roasted on the fire, and pots and pans had been placed upon the grate. It was clear that the residents of the house had left in a hurry. Some of the British soldiers sat down at the dinner table and enjoyed a tasty meal. For some of these men, it was the first home-cooked meal they'd eaten in quite some time. When they were done, they ransacked the house. Ransacked means to have looked for something in a way that caused disorder or made a mess. They stole anything they could carry away, and then, before they left, they set fire to the president's house. As the flames burned around them, the British marched out of the city. "Was everything ruined?" asked Adele from atop the bales of hay. "Many buildings were," explained Grandfather Lafitte. "When the British Army reached the capital, they destroyed all the public buildings. Many of them had just been built. The President's house, the Senate house, as well as an important dockyard area, storehouses, and much more. As luck would have it, rain clouds gathered and a big storm moved in. The rain and wind helped to quench the flames. Quench means to put something out or to reduce or lessen it. Several days later, when the Madisons returned, they found their home still standing, but it had been very badly damaged. The fire had blackened the walls, many of the windows were broken, and most of their possessions were gone. They were very sad." "That is sad," said Adele as she peered down at her grandfather. "Well, my next story will cheer you up," said Grandfather Lafitte joyfully. "The British got more than they bargained for when they tried to do the same thing in Baltimore."